Hi, I'm Amanda, and I'm going to talk about core shame and adopted children. So there's a difference between guilt and shame. Guilt is a tool. It's our conscience or our moral understanding pushing us to change a behavior. It's required for society. But shame is this overwhelming feeling that we are worthless. It's a response in disgust to who we are rather than an action we performed. And it comes from a fear that we'll lose our relationships. So shame is very different for an adopted child than it is for most other people. Shame for children who have experienced rejection and hardship can be a distaste for who they are fundamentally. It's a persistent and consistent feeling of worthlessness, and it goes down to the core of who that child is. They feel they may never have a relationship, and it taints everything they know, and they need care that they can count on to counteract this feeling of shame. So where does this overwhelming feeling of shame come from? And a lot of it is because of experiences when children were younger. So this is exemplified in babies who don't experience attention. They begin to feel stressed, and then they try to get their mother's attention. This proves that we're wired for connection. So when we don't receive the connection we need, and things like abuse and neglect in transition between houses and inconsistency occur, it children don't have the fuel they need for connection. They've never been delighted in. They've never have had the feeling, or rarely or can't consistently have the feeling that they are worth loving. And sometimes they question why this would happen, and this results in self-blame. So children are lacking the fundamental things they need to feel good about themselves. And this core shame will be seen in their behavior. They'll avoid eye contact, they'll turn their head away, they'll slouch, they'll feel powerless, and in despair, they'll avoid attention, so they might not want to be touched. And that's because it can be a very painful experience. It can be triggering, which is what we'll talk about next. So why can core shame be triggered? Well, it's a part of who that child is right now. It's how they perceive the world, and it can't just be sucked out and removed. But understanding what can trigger a child can help you understand how to help the child. So things that mimic experiences they've had in the past. So force or aggression can really mimic this, consequences can, and then also statements that don't match their view of themselves. So you're so awesome triggers the feeling of I'm not, and I don't want to disappoint you. Um, eye contact can be very triggering because it's a relational thing that the child doesn't feel like they deserve, or they feel like they'll be seen entirely, and that's very vulnerable. So I mentioned some of these before, but some of the things that can trigger this core shame is forced eye contact. Success can. Any reminders of previous experiences of neglect and abuse. Um, children feeling that they can't do what they're asked or they can't make a change. Any criticism. If a parent says no to a child, it may feel like they are being rejected rather than rejecting their offer. Bad behavior and consequences, and anything that requires measuring up. So grades and competitions and judgments and things like that. So I left an overall, but in summary, judgment of behavior is very difficult because they don't feel like they're being judged for what they did, but for who they are. Connecting with this feeling of shame is so hard for parents. So it's important for parents to ask themselves if there's something that is keeping them from connecting to their child's shame. Um, your perfectionism might tell where some of your shame lies, and you should be aware of your own triggers of shame, as well as some of your experiences that have brought shame from your childhood. If there was embarrassment or you lost someone and you blamed yourself for that, any difficulty. that may have been your fault or may have been interpreted as your fault can boil over into your child's shame, and it's important to respond to their shame rather than from your own. So with this this requirement of understanding your own shame and getting in touch with how your child might trigger you, it is important to remember what it's like to feel that shame. So if you can close your eyes for 5 seconds and think about a time where you felt shame and where that occurred in your body. And if it was overwhelming, where did you feel that and how overwhelming it is? So we'll do this little exercise here. Okay. So I know it was really short, but this is a practice in just getting a little taste of what it's like for your child. Um, they experience shame day in and day out. It's a fundamental feeling of who they are. And it's important to respond as parents to what that experience is like for them. So what can you do? How do you respond when your child's triggered or when you're triggered yourself? And the first thing to remember is empathy is the opposite of shame. Understanding is the opposite of judgment. So know your triggers. Be able to take a step back and take a deep breath and connect with your child. Put yourself in their shoes. Connect with their history. And also it's important to connect them with their history. Build this narrative for them and help them understand themselves and how to respond emotionally to situations. And it's okay to apologize and repair the relationship. So if you blow up or you're dismissive, or even if you dismiss your child's feelings in a very well-meaning way, such as saying, don't feel that way. I don't feel that way about you. You're great. You're super smart. You're not responding from where they're at. So apologize and keep moving. You're not going to be perfect every day. And these are my references.